that's good news. That should have started, but good to get that going now. So yeah, fossil-free Parliament is working to put this to a stop and to make it difficult, impossible even, for the industry to promote its interest to our decision makers behind closed doors. And in turn, as we've tried to indicate here in this illustration, to champion those who should have seats at the table, particularly in energy and climate policy discussions, instead of the fossil fuel industry. So be that oil and gas workers who are calling for a just transition, representatives from communities around the world, particularly the global south, who are currently facing the worst effects of the climate crisis, and people struggling with fuel poverty at the moment, and like fuel poverty campaign groups, and of course, many more. So as some of you may know already, or may not, Fossil-Free Parliament was actually born out of the Divest Parliament campaign, which was well, it kind of still exists under the banner of Fossil-Free Parliament, but when it was just Divest Parliament, it was focused on getting the MP pension fund to divest from fossil fuels, because back in 2016, it was revealed that the MP pension fund held significant holdings in BP and Shell. They were in the top 20 holdings. So this campaign was built as a pledge campaign as well, with a group of volunteer campaigners asking MPs to sign a pledge saying that they didn't want their pension fund invested in fossil fuels. And this pledge was being delivered as it was being signed to the trustees to build pressure on them to divest. And over the course of a few years, those 350 current and former MPs signed this pledge, including like Keir Starmer and Ed Davey, Lord Deben, Vera Hobhouse, Liz Savile-Roberts, and majority of SNP MPs, so lots, 350. And this created a huge amount of pressure to the extent that we did see the holdings in BP and Shell drop out of the fund's top 20 investments. But then we hit a bit of a wall. So the trustees throughout this time were refusing to tell us what was in the rest of the portfolio. So when BP and Shell dropped out of the top 20, we didn't know if they were still invested in fossil fuels at all. We did a little bit of digging into the named holdings and the funds that they were invested in, and it did look like they may actually have divested. But what did that mean if they wouldn't admit it? Because so much of divestment work is about getting that public divestment commitment. And so we had this kind of back and forth with the trustees, trying to get them to say whether or not they still held fossil fuel investments, and they refused, regardless of who was asking, be it us or MPs. And so we organized a strategy day to try and rethink our approach. And it was out of that strategy day that Fossil-Free Parliament was born, because we decided that this group of trustees, who are just a small group of people, there's 10 of them, a handful of MPs and advisors, and we thought that they probably wouldn't make a divestment commitment on behalf of parliamentarians, whilst we have a parliament that is pretty in bed with the fossil fuel industry. And so we decided to scale up the campaign to take on not just the financial ties that MPs have to the fossil fuel industry through their pension fund, but all of the ties. And we'll talk to that a little bit when we talk about our demands, which Lewis is going to kindly do in a moment. Yeah, and these are just a couple of screenshots of press that we had over the years about Divest Parliament. So the 300 MPs moment, with a picture of Jeremy Corbyn, who was leader of the Labour Party at the time that he signed, and a more recent instance where the Divest Parliament pledge was reinvigorated by Zara Sultana, who coordinated 130 MPs to sign a new kind of divestment pledge in around COP26. But again, the trustees were unresponsive. So yeah, Fossil-Free Parliament was born. So what does Fossil-Free Parliament look like now? At the moment, we're a small, dedicated volunteer campaign team, for the most part, with the support of 2 campaign consultants. So that's myself and Rob, who's chairing today. And we each work up to 8 hours a week. And around that, we are supported by Friends of the Earth. But for the most part, our campaign operates independently of Friends of the Earth. It's a grassroots group. And so it would be, yeah, we're looking for more people to join our campaign team, which is partly what this call is about. So hopefully everyone gets excited enough to want to get involved. Anyway, so over the course of the past year, since we had this strategy day, we've been trying to figure out what a Fossil-Free Parliament campaign looks like. And so that has involved a few different strands of work: research, trying to understand what the picture of fossil fuel influence looks like within Parliament. and relationship building with other campaign groups, particularly groups who are working on similar things. So fossil-free politics has become one of our key allies, and they're a group who've been campaigning on this issue within the European Parliament for the last couple of years. So we've got a lot to learn from them, and it's really brilliant to see what's worked for them, what's not working so well, and to be partnered with them in this work. And then through that, we've been developing our demands and political strategy. So at this point, I am going to hand over to Lewis, who's going to talk us through our demands. Lewis, are you okay to go?
Hi, yes, good to go. Hi, my name's Lewis, and I'm a campaigner with Fossil Free Parliament and previously Divest Parliament before that. I'm calling from Glasgow, and I use the pronouns he, him. I'm going to talk through our 5 demands and sort of give a little bit of information about each one and a bit of evidence that explains why we think it's important. So the first demand, which is to block the money pipeline, is the one that we're focusing on today and one that we kind of want to lead off the campaign with. Basically, this is about asking MPs to reject donations and other forms of financial support from the fossil fuel industry. We think this is important because those donations are an important method that the fossil fuel industry uses to try and exercise control over decision makers. So to give an example of this, we know that before the publication of the North Sea transition deal in March 2021, the Conservative Party received more than 400,000 in donations from companies and individuals involved in the North Sea oil and gas industry. And when it was published, the deal made no mention at all of an end date for fossil fuel extraction in the North Sea and included grounds for the approval of new drilling licenses. So there's an interesting connection to be drawn between those donations received in that period and the results of that decision. The second demand we've titled Reject the Invitations. So this is about asking MPs and decision makers not to participate in fossil fuel industry events and to also prevent the fossil fuel industry from holding events on parliamentary premises. So to give an example of this, we know that on Thursday, the 22nd of June, earlier this year, the fossil fuel company Equinor invited all MPs and peers to a breakfast reception at the House of Lords to discuss their new Energy Perspectives report. In the report, Equinor states that the Russian war against Ukraine is making the 1.5-degree global heating limit ambition increasingly difficult to achieve, as Equinor is pushing the UK government to approve their plans to develop Rosebank, which is the largest undeveloped oil and gas field in the North Sea. The subtext of this report is clearly an argument for continued fossil fuel extraction to ensure energy security at the cost of accelerated devastation to our climate. So you can see how there are these insidious ways that fossil fuel companies have this power to hold events like this within parliamentary grounds, which influence decision makers. This is something that grassroots campaign groups never get the opportunity to do. So there's a clear imbalance of power there. The third demand is around removing the seat at the table. So basically removing from fossil fuel companies the ability to influence decisions made in Parliament. So fossil fuel companies actually get a lot of opportunities to meet with decision makers, either through lobbying methods or through participation in APPGs or other groups like that. We know that between 2019 and 2021, government ministers met with fossil fuel representatives 9 times more frequently than they met with renewable energy representatives, which is a very clear imbalance. And this pattern has continued. So the government has doubled down on its support for the fossil fuel industry at home, stating in the Powering Up Britain report last month that it remains absolutely committed to maximising the vital production of North Sea oil and gas. So again, you can see how there's a clear imbalance here between how much influence fossil fuel companies get in talks like this and groups who are pushing for a just transition away from fossil fuels. And we can see how that is influencing the decisions that are made in Parliament and by our decision makers. The fourth demand is basically retaining the core demand of the Divest Parliament campaign, so to divest the Parliamentary Pension Fund. We think this remains important because while MPs' pensions are invested in the fossil fuel industry, there's a clear conflict of interest between their own personal finances and the decisions they need to make. It would also be a really important demonstration of stance for the pension fund to move away from fossil fuels. And we've got a really strong basis to build on here. So we know that 350 current and former MPs have called for the pension fund to be divested from fossil fuels, but the trustees have still not moved. So there's a really strong basis for us to build on with that demand. And then the final and perhaps most shocking demand of all is about breaking the revolving door. So this is around MPs actually having jobs in the fossil fuel industry, so essentially being in paid employment as part of the industry that they need to be taking decisions to scale down and remove. So there are a number of sitting MPs who work as consultants for the fossil fuel industry and its affiliates. Many of these worked for the fossil fuel industry before entering politics, and many former MPs who have gone on to significant roles in fossil fuels. So for example, there's Amber Rudd, who was Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change between 2015 and 2016. During her tenure, she called for the continued support of the North Sea oil and gas industry and fought against subsidies for onshore wind. And then less than a year after stepping down from Parliament, Rudd became the chair of the Equinor, that company again, Equinor UK's international advisory group. So you can see how there's another conflict of interest here where the decisions that are made by politicians during their time in Parliament can then affect the jobs they get afterwards, jobs, potentially very lucrative jobs in the fossil fuel industry. There's also jobs being held while people are actually MPs as part of the second jobs or additional work, which again is going to influence their own decision making. So yeah, that's the 5 demands and the rationale behind them. Hopefully that's all clear and makes sense. Feel free to put any questions about those in the chat. We recognize these are big and quite sweeping demands, but we're trying to address all the different angles by which the fossil fuel industry gains control over decision making in our parliament. And we're going to be trying to address these in turn. We can't necessarily fix all of it at once, but we're trying to make it clear what the scale of the problem is. And we're going to be looking at all these different angles as a campaign.
Thanks so much, Lewis. That's fantastic to hear about. And thank you for joining in spite of transport delays, meaning you're joining us from outside. Massively appreciate it. We're now going to move on to the first of our 2 speakers. Mabeeb Kamalee is the Public Affairs Officer at Uplift, and I believe is going to be speaking to us tonight about why the climate movement needs to tackle the fossil fuel industry influence over politics. So over to you, Mabeeb.
Yes, hi, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for being here. So yes, as has been said, I'm the Public Affairs Officer at Uplift UK, and we are working to end new oil and gas, and particularly call on politicians to stop Rosebank and stop the approval. And successfully, I think our demands have seen some fruition with a delay time and time again with the government trying to move themselves away from saying the decision is not on their table and it's up to the NSTA, and the importance of trying to push for demands like this can be seen throughout. I think this month itself, all of North America and Europe seeing all of the devastating effects that the global south have been seeing for so long just shows how important it is to continue this fight and keep calling for an end to new fossil fuels. And I've previously worked in the offices of Shaban Mahmood and Zara Sultana MP, and I've seen the inside track of how we can call on Parliament to make these changes. In my experience, it's been easier to reach politicians who are already inclined to these kind of activities, who are happy to raise their profile on these issues, happy to speak out, people who are already on the left or within the centre, or very happy to talk about environmental or climate issues. The kind of challenges come with politicians who aren't willing to speak out about these things, or are quite, they just don't want to decrease their voter base or their electorate by talking about decreasing our energy security. And I think with the cost of living crisis, fueled by the Russian invasion, it's become a huge political topic rather than just climate consensus, which is what we've had before. And we're seeing it more and more difficult to kind of engage people on the right or even within the centre, trying to get them to speak out against ending fossil fuels, because they're kind of drawing to the fact that imports will, you know, bring in higher emissions and things like this. And I think it's really important to tackle that language. So what we're trying to do at Uplift and within the wider movement is kind of pitch this as a common sense framing. This isn't anything radical at all. In order for us to move forward with any of this and to actually see the climate crisis have some sort of mitigation beyond the effects that have already happened, we need to frame this as a common sense issue that is backed by a large proportion of the electorate. And I think that will come from polling. I'm really big on making sure, especially ahead of the general election, we keep polling at the doorstep, try and get all of the major parties to include questions for when the volunteers are out there knocking on doors about the climate, and just to hear people's thoughts, even in like the blue heartlands and all of within voters that you wouldn't usually see engaged in this debate, because I think we kind of get stuck in this echo chamber of a lot of us who already agree on these things just speaking to each other and just having the same conversations but not breaking out within that circle. So I think it's really important to try and engage politicians and voters who are outside of that circle, and I think that's going to be one of our challenges for Fossil Free Parliament and organisations like Uplift, to try and reach the persuadables and see how we can involve them in this conversation, so we can show the government and the major parties that this isn't something we need to backtrack on. Green policies need to be pushed. We need to push for net zero, and that comes from ending all investment in fossil fuels, making sure they have no say in our politics. And yes, I think the bill put forward by Richard is an amazing start to that, and we need more things like this movement, like that bill, and we need to keep engaging politicians as much as we can. And I think everyone in this call should try and contact their member of parliament and not just be happy with the kind of standard response they get. Keep pushing, don't ask for the same line, ask for a meeting with them, see them face to face, get them to sign Richard's bill, get them to get involved with this movement as well. And I think as long as we have the hope, we can keep moving forward and keep pitching this as a common sense issue and get everyone involved as much as we can. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Richard has to say.
Thank you so much, Mabeeb. That's amazing and speaks very nicely to what our next thing is, which is our ask of all of you today. So I'm going to invite John from our campaign team to run you through that. And if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you, John. John, I think you're on mute, unfortunately.
Okay, that helps. Sorry about that. Thank you. Evening, folks. My name's John. I'm based in Edinburgh, and I'm also a member of the Fossil Free Parliament team. Thank you very much to Mabeeb for that talk, just outlining the extent really of the problem and also what we need to do about it. And that brings us very nicely on to our ask this evening. So what you can do, everyone on this call, even while we're on the call, can actually email your MPs and ask them to sign the pledge. I think Rob has just shared the link to the Action Network page. So if you fill in your details there and your along with your postcode, that will automatically find your MP and you can email them this evening. So please do that either while we're on the call, it only takes a minute to do, or in the next few days. And as Mabeeb said, don't Yeah, don't be satisfied with just a standard response. Please do follow up and ask our MP. If they don't respond, please ask them for a response. And when they do, please ask them about it and question them on it, and ask them what they're going to do about it. We will then also be following up with everyone on the call, hopefully, to see how you're getting on with contacting your MPs. And we will be having an activism engagement organizing meeting on the 8th of August. That's a Tuesday at 7:30. The details are just up on the slide there. So hopefully you can join us because really we've set up this campaign group, but we can't do this all just by ourselves. We need the support of everyone on this call and more people besides, because we're trying to change not just UK politics, but we're trying to, in a way, really change the world as well. So as many people that are involved, the better. So yeah, please email your MP using the Action Network tool. Join our mailing list so that we can stay in touch and follow up and see how you're getting on with your contacting your MP, and if you need any help or support or suggestions on best way to do that. And then yeah, please also join our organizing call on Tuesday the 8th of August, where we'll be able to give some more information on how you can get involved in the campaign overall. And it's great to see so few people have already emailed their MPs. Thank you very, very much. And the more people that do that, obviously, the more likely we're going to get responses and get pledges and get people involved. So thank you.
Thanks so much, John. Yeah, it's great to see people contacting their MPs. This is the first day that this pledge has been live, so no MPs are signed up yet, but hopefully we'll have some shortly based on some of the contact that we're having today. We're now going to go back to Karis and Sally, who are going to just have a little chat about what it's like to volunteer on this campaign. Over to you, Karis, and then Sally.
Hello again, everyone. Sally, yeah, so I'm basically we're gonna have a little interview conversation about Sally's previous experience as a diverse parliament campaigner and how that translates to what we're trying to do now with Fossil Free Parliament and with this work on this new no fossil funding pledge. So Sally, I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about the processes that you went through when you were asking MPs to sign the Diverse Parliament Pledge. Maybe first talking about your experience of working with your own MP, if you did that, or if you were working with other MPs. Just, yeah, talking us kind of through the step by step.
No problem at all. It's really great to be here with everyone tonight. Thanks so much for joining. So when you're thinking about contacting your own MP, a really great thing to do, first of all, is to use the e-action that Karis and Rob have been sharing in the chat. And you can send that initial email. You can also personalize it. And hopefully you'll get some kind of response back from your MP, but it's also a really great idea to try and send a personal email to your MP and to say why you really care about this issue. And I was lucky enough when I joined the Diverse Parliament campaign to do some incredible training with Diverse Parliament and a wonderful charity called Hope for the Future. And we're very excited that Hope for the Future are going to be offering us a training event in the next month or so, which I would really recommend. It would be a brilliant thing to join because they help you learn about how to build a positive relationship with your MP. They helped us to understand some of the pressures that MPs might be facing and how we can research the things that our MPs are interested in so that we can try and find some common ground that we can discuss when we're meeting with our MP. For example, your MP might be concerned about air pollution, or they might be talking about some of the record temperatures we're seeing all around the world at the moment and the terrible wildfires. And if you can find some climate issues that your MP cares about, that can be a really great thing to mention in your initial email to them. And it's also a great idea to try and ask them for a meeting, whether it's an online meeting or a phone call, or ideally you can even go along to one of their surgeries and meet them in person. And when I was meeting my MP, it was a Conservative initially, and I was asking him if he would sign the Divest Parliament Pledge. I first of all tried emailing him and didn't get to reply. So it's always worthwhile just following up with your email. Try calling your MP's office and asking if they've received your initial email. And that can be a really great way to get in touch with your MP's team. You can hopefully get an email address for maybe their head of research or their office manager, and then you've got a direct link to your MP's office, which is really, really useful. And you can build up that positive link to them and ask for a meeting. And when I first met my MP, I was quite nervous because I thought, what can I speak to them about? But it's really helpful to think about why you care about this issue, why you want your MP to pledge not to accept fossil fuel funding, and also to have a very clear idea of what the problem is, that fossil fuel companies are influencing MPs negatively and preventing climate action, and then to have a clear idea of what the solution is, that if we stop fossil fuel funding of MPs, then we can make a massive difference towards positive climate action in Westminster. And also it's very helpful to have a clear ask of what you would like your MP to do. So specifically that you'd like them to sign the pledge for fossil-free Parliament. But don't be downhearted if your MP doesn't want to sign. My Conservative MP didn't want to sign the Divest Parliament Pledge. Sometimes MPs either don't sign pledges or they can't because of their parliamentary position. But my MP did offer to do something else to help the campaign. He offered to write to the trustees of the MP pension fund about their fossil fuel investments. And he did find out some very helpful information that he then shared with me and was able to share with the campaign team. So sometimes your MP might not want to sign the pledge, but they will be willing to do something else. And potentially you could ask them to ask a parliamentary question about fossil fuel donations to MPs, or they could write to a government minister. So it's always really helpful to think about your clear ask, but also to have a plan B in case they don't want to do your initial first thing.
Thank you so much, Sally and Caris. That was amazing to hear from. To those in the chat talking about some people having some issues in using the Action Network, we will definitely be in touch with you after this event with the text that we're encouraging everybody to send, and we'll continue to look into sorting whatever issue that you have. It seems like it's a problem for some people and not for others. So we'll continue to, campaign team will continue to address different concerns in the chat box. But for now, I'm going to move to our next amazing speaker, Richard Burgon MP. Richard, over to you.
Thanks very much. And you can certainly sign me up for the MP's pledge, because otherwise there'd been a lot of bother tonight, wouldn't I? Coming on the call and that's not signing up for it. But no, that's fantastic. And it's been really interesting to hear how you're going about this campaign. And the last speaker, I thought it was really interesting, the way that you were working out how's the best way to get MPs who may have differing perspectives from us to at least do something positive. And that's a really good way forward to try and build alliances and build as much support as possible. Thanks so much for inviting me to this meeting. I completely support your campaign for fossil-free politics, and I'll be a champion of your campaign in the House of Commons. And I don't need to tell anybody on this call about the role that fossil fuel companies have played in bringing our world to the brink of climate catastrophe, or that the scenes that we're already seeing across the world of floods and fires are horrific, but are just a drop in the ocean of what's to happen worldwide if we don't act. If we're going to have a fighting chance of preventing climate disaster, then we need to rapidly cut fossil fuel use. But the huge power, economic power and political power that the oil and gas giants have is a huge barrier to climate action of the speed and scale that we need. So I just want to run through some recent headlines highlighting the very close relationship between fossil fuel firms and our politics. In March, one Guardian headline said £3.5 million of Tory donations linked to pollution and climate denial, says reports. This followed up on a Guardian headline in 2022 saying Tories received £1.3 million from fossil fuel interests and climate skeptics since 2019. Last year, the Mirror wrote, Rishi Sunak accepted cash from fossil fuel investors in campaign to become PM. And they cited sources that Sunak had received £141,000 from individuals and companies with financial ties to the oil and gas sectors in 2022. Last year, The Independent wrote that Liz Truss's campaign's biggest donation came from the wife of former BP executive, who they explained donated £100,000 to Truss's successful bid to become PM. The Mirror explained that Tory Minister Nadhim Zahawi pockets fortune from second job at oil company and said, and I quote, Zahawi banked £1.3 million from an oil company, while Open Democracy claimed that a Tory MP calling for delay to UK climate action has banked £150,000 from an oil firm. Let's just say that there's clearly an issue in our politics. So last week, as has been mentioned, I presented my parliamentary bill banning MPs from taking any oil and gas funding. It's now live on the House of Commons website. My private member's bill will prevent MPs from taking any second jobs with fossil fuel companies. It would stop MPs receiving donations, gifts, hospitality or benefits in kind from any company that makes more than 50% of its annual revenue from oil or gas. It would stop oil and gas firms staffing and doing research for all party parliamentary groups. And it would also force the government to end investments by the Parliamentary Contributory Pension Fund in any oil and gas companies. The aim of my bill, just like the aim of your campaign, is clear: to break the huge influence that oil and gas companies have long had over our politics. These firms, just like with tobacco companies in the past, have created a huge threat to public health and to public safety. We have to remove their social license to act as legitimate actors in our politics. My bill will help build a firewall we need between our political decision makers and the oil and gas corporations that have knowingly driven a climate crisis. So in terms of next steps, over the autumn and in the run-up to the next COP, ludicrously in an oil state, in December, I want my bill to be a focus in Parliament, highlighting these links between the fossil fuel industry and our politics. I'm going to be organising a motion in support of my bill that we can get as many MPs from as many parties as possible to support. I'll be organising a debate for MPs, and I'll be happy to host events for you to put pressure on and lobby MPs to support your campaigns to kick the super polluters out of our politics and to build a fossil fuel free politics.
Thank you so much, Richard. And amazing timing that we had this call lined up at the same time as you having the private members bill last week. If there's anything that you wanted to share in the chat relating to that, feel free to do so. I'm going to now move to our final speaker, which is just John, again, to just remind everybody of our next steps, and then we're going to close because we don't want to take too much of your time this evening. So over to you, John, and then we're going to close. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Rob, and thank you very much, Richard. That was very interesting, and I think that just highlights the extent of the problem that we're facing with the influence of fossil fuels in our parliament and in our politics. But as we said earlier, there is ways that people on this call and wider can get involved. So if you haven't already, please do email your MP using the Action Network tool. The link is in the chat. please join our mailing list so that we can stay in touch and keep you up to date on the campaign. And please join our organising call on Tuesday, the 8th of August. This is completely grassroots, people-powered campaign, and we need as many people as possible involved to help bring about a fossil-free parliament. So yes, there's plenty of ways for everyone on this call to get involved, and please share as widely as you can as well. So thank you very much for joining, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks very much, John, and thank you again to our speakers, from Karis to Sally to Richard to Mabeeb to John and to Lewis. It's fantastic to have so many of us involved in this campaign, and really hope that others of the 40 odd of you that are here tonight and those of you watching at home later on from the recording are able to get involved. We'd love to have you. For now though, I'm just going to close out and say thank you so much again. We will be sharing the recording of this, and we will share the relevant links shared in the chat with any of you as well. Thank you so much, and good night. I'm going to close the call now and start booting people out. So end the recording. Here we go. If someone can do that.